London. It's a city that feels ancient and brand new all at once, right? A massive, sprawling place that's been at the center of the world for centuries. But how did it get to be that way? Well, in this explainer, we're going to peel back 2,000 years of history to see how a tiny Roman outpost became the global powerhouse it is today.
Today, London is home to a staggering 8.9 million people. I mean, just think about that. It's a true mega metropolis. But it's not just the size that's so incredible, it's the people who call it home.
And get this, the people are just as remarkable. Nearly 40% of Londoners were born overseas. That makes it one of the most multicultural cities on the entire planet. And while you might think this is a recent thing, this story of a city shaped by people from all over the world has been London's reality for pretty much its entire existence.
So, that brings us to the big question for this whole explainer. How did this all happen? How did a small, provincial Roman town on the very edge of the empire grow into this epicenter of politics, finance, and culture? Well, the answer is an incredible story of destruction and constant rebirth. Okay, so our story starts where so many stories in Britain do, with the Romans. This first chapter is all about a cycle of being founded, getting completely destroyed, and eventually being reborn under a totally new name.
So, way back in 43 AD, the Romans founded Londinium at a really smart crossing point on the River Thames, but it didn't last long. Just over a decade later, it was burned to the ground by the Celtic Queen Boudicca. The Romans, though, they rebuilt it, bigger and better. They even put up a massive defensive wall, and you can still see parts of it today, which is amazing. But by 410 AD, the Roman Empire was crumbling, and they just left Britain, leaving Londinium to fall into ruin.
And this pattern of being abandoned and then resettled, it just kept happening. When the Anglo-Saxons showed up, they didn't even bother with the old Roman city. Instead, they built a new trading port just to the west called Londonwick. But then came the Vikings. After years of raids, Alfred the Great had a great idea. He realized the best defense was those old Roman walls. So he moved the population back inside the original city, rebuilt the defenses, and gave it a new name, Londonburg.
All right, let's jump forward to the medieval period. This is a time when London really started to flex its muscles and cement its power. But it also faced some absolutely unimaginable dangers. We're talking an era of crowns, commerce, and constant catastrophe.
In 1066, everything changes. William the Conqueror marches on London. He's crowned at Westminster Abbey, and right away he starts building the Tower of London. Not just a castle, but a formidable fortress to send a very clear message to the locals about who was in charge now. With the royals based here, the city just exploded. The population soared, and powerful trade guilds popped up to organize its booming economy.
But all that growth came with incredible peril. In 1348, the Black Death arrived. It was a plague so devastating that at its peak, it was killing 200 Londoners every single day. Just a few decades later, the whole city was ransacked during the Peasants' Revolt, a huge uprising against high taxes that saw government officials hunted down and killed right in the streets.
And you know, life was just harsh. There was no formal police force. Justice was basically public theater, meant to scare criminals straight. Executions at places like Tower Hill were these grim public events carried out in front of what historical sources describe as a large jeering crowd.
So as we roll into the 17th century, London faced what you could argue was its greatest trial yet. This was a period that saw civil war, another horrific plague, and a fire that would change the city forever. The sequence of events is just staggering when you look at it. The century kicks off with the failed gunpowder plot to blow up Parliament. By the middle of it, a civil war leads to the public execution of a king right in the heart of London. And just when the monarchy gets restored, the city gets hit with a 1-2 punch of almost biblical proportions. First came the Great Plague of 1665. The disease just tore through the crowded, dirty streets and ended up claiming the lives of a staggering 60,000 people. It was a scene of absolute horror. And then, the very next year, the Great Fire rips through and destroys most of the medieval city. But as we've learned, out of those ashes, a new London was born. They didn't just rebuild, they completely reimagined it. New rules meant buildings had to be stone and brick, not wood. And the architect Sir Christopher Wren gave the city its iconic new skyline, dominated by his masterpiece, St. Paul's Cathedral. This brings us to the 19th century. Now, London is fueled by the Industrial Revolution and the incredible wealth of a growing empire, and it transforms into the largest and most powerful city on Earth.
The growth was just explosive. In 1801, London's population hits 1 million. By the end of that same century, it was home to nearly 7 million people. The invention of railways and the underground, the tube, just fueled this massive expansion out into the suburbs.
But Victorian London really had two very different faces. On one hand, you had these incredible marvels like the Great Exhibition and grand new landmarks like Big Ben. But on the other, you had these overcrowded, poverty-stricken slums and a River Thames so polluted with raw sewage that in 1858 the smell, which they called the Great Stink, was completely overwhelming.
And the solution came from this man, Joseph Bazalgette. He was a brilliant civil engineer who designed and built a revolutionary new sewer system that diverted all that waste away from the river. It was this monumental feat of engineering that completely ended the deadly cholera outbreaks and probably saved more lives than any other official of his time.
So, moving into the modern era, the 20th century saw London tested by two world wars, forcing it, yet again, to rebuild from the ashes and completely redefine its identity.
During World War II, London had to endure the Blitz. For months on end, the city was under relentless bombing raids. German bombers dropped over 18,000 tons of high explosives, targeting the docks, industry, and the historic heart of the city itself.
The human cost was just immense. By the end of the war, the bombing had killed around 30,000 Londoners and left hundreds of thousands more without a home. The city was scarred, deeply, but its spirit was absolutely unbroken.
And the post-war rebuilding, it was about so much more than just bricks and mortar. New waves of immigrants started arriving, a lot of them from across the British Commonwealth, adding new threads to the city's cosmopolitan fabric. You combine that with the cultural explosion of the swinging 60s, and that's what really forged the dynamic, diverse, and modern London that we all recognize today.
And that really brings us to the core of London's story. It's a city built on layers. You have Roman walls holding up medieval streets, which sit right beside Victorian marvels and modern glass skyscrapers. Every single cycle of destruction has been followed by a period of rebirth, with each era leaving its own unique mark on the one that came after.
From a tiny Roman outpost to a global capital, London's history is one of incredible resilience and constant change. It really makes you wonder, as the city faces all the challenges of the 21st century, what will be the next layer added to its incredible 2,000-year story?